Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a book review about Fluent Forever by Gabriel Wyner. So in my video about 20 books that I wanted to read this year, I listed Fluent Forever. And right now I finished this book. I read it some things a couple of times and I made this review, and I just wanted to talk about how I use this book in my daily language learning and if I liked it or didn't like it, and just my general opinion about the method that Gabriel Wyner uses in language learning. So I hope you will enjoy this video. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you for everyone who has been watching me from the beginning of my starting of my YouTube channel. So I started in March and right now I have been doing this for 5 months. And from 0 subscribers, or I had 1 subscriber, from 1 subscriber I went to 56 right now as we're speaking. So I'm very proud of all my subscribers and I'm so glad that you're watching my videos and that you like the content. So I hope you will continue watching my videos, and for everyone who is new to this channel, I hope you enjoy every content that I'm going to make in the future. And most of this channel I'm going to focus on language learning. So yeah, thank you so much guys for watching and for liking my videos and leaving comments. It's been great to getting to know some of you through your comments and to know about the languages that you are learning, and I hope my videos will help you in your language learning journey. So yeah, let's continue to the topic of this video, which is this book. So it's written by Gabriel Wyner. So Gabriel Wyner is an opera singer, a polyglot, and also an author. And he learned German, French, Russian, Japanese, and he still continues learning other languages. And he discovered a method that works for him, and he thinks that it also will work for other people to learn languages faster, but also to still remember languages for a longer time. Because like we all know, if you're learning a language and you're not living in that country which is speaks that language, so you're learning in your own country a foreign language, it can be very hard to practice all language parts. So speaking, reading, listening, because you don't hear this language everywhere. So you have to put in a little bit more effort than when you living in a country and hear the language all around you. But what Gabriel Wyner says is that you can learn any language, it doesn't matter which language, as long as you do it the right way. And I think that's true. I don't think there is any language that you can't learn if you really want to, and if you put in the work, it's possible. And he gives you in this book some tips and some advice on how to learn a language easier. So I'm not going to say that this is like the only method, or that you really need to read this book to learn languages, because even before, of course, this book was written, people were learning languages all over the world and there always existed polyglots. But a lot of the advice that is given in this book is very interesting, and since I have read this book, I started to use some of his advice in my own language learning, and it has been working for me. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. So overall, I'm very glad that I have read this book, and I think it has changed some of my methods in language learning. So first of all, it's not very thick book, so you can go through it quite fast. A lot of the tips that I liked are in the beginning of the book, so a lot of the information that I liked is in the beginning of the book, and at the end of the book I only read the tips that were applying for the languages that I learn, which is Japanese, and right now I am also starting out with Mandarin. So I try to read up about the methods that I'm working for this language. So if you're learning French or Italian or Spanish, some other parts of the book will be more interesting for you. And that's why I think I like this book a lot, is because you just can skip the parts that you don't need for your language right now, and when you're starting out another language, you can pick up this book again and read some more tips about that specific language. So I did read the entire book, but some parts I have reread and just remember them better or use them to my own language learning. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the general idea of this book, and this idea is that you can learn most parts of the language just by flashcards. So I'm not saying that the only thing that I'm doing for Japanese is making flashcards, since I have read this book, But before that I knew about this book, I was mostly filling out my notebooks, going through lessons, and then try to remember, of course, the things that I have learned. But my general idea was just to write a lot of things out and then after a while review them by reading back in my notebooks. But the problem with that was that most of the time I didn't go back in my notebooks and I didn't make flashcards all that much. I started out with making my own flashcards on paper. I made a video about that too, and that did work for me pretty well, but it is very time consuming and eventually I stopped doing it. And that means that I didn't have a good system to review everything that I have learned previously, and when you don't review things you start to forget them. So in his book, a lot of the information, the beginning of the book is going about how your memory works, why you forget certain things, how it comes out when you're hearing a foreign language for the first time, or when you don't know any words in that language, it just sounds to you like one big pile of words that you don't understand and it all sounds the same. So you don't recognize anything and it just goes through you and you don't remember anything. And when you started out, you started to learn more words, of course, but when you don't use them and when you don't review them, you start to forget them and you forget very fast. So in his book, he describes how this forgetting process works, and there's like this graphic and it actually says that when you, so there was this research about people who had to remember, students who had to remember certain words, and then they were asked again and again. And from that research, they discovered that a lot of information is just getting lost, but that you do remember information better when you get tested on it and not when you're just reading through it and when you're rereading the information. So I found that very interesting because most of my study methods for language learning was existing of just reading the information, writing it down, and then rereading it again, or sometimes listening to the explanations on YouTube. So it is a way of learning, of course, but a lot of the information I did forgot. I have used this method for a lot of things. Of course, I use this method in school. Most of the things that I read, I remember quite well. But with languages, it's just a little bit harder because it's just foreign words that you need to remember with a certain translation, and it's just not that's just not the information that's going to stick in your memory for a long time if you don't review it. And just reviewing your notes, I have to talk about my own experience. Most of the time I don't do it. I just write down new notes and I don't always look back. Most of the time I don't look back at the older notes that I have taken because it is time consuming. So flashcards are a great idea, and he also talks about in his books on how to make your own flashcards, like the manual way, writing them yourself. But the fastest way, of course, is to use an app or another program to review your cards and to make your cards, because it's just a lot faster, and we do use our mobile phones like daily and we always have them with them, so it's much more efficient to use an app for your flashcards. So that's why he focused on flashcards more. And since I have read this book, I started to really depending on my flashcards. So again, I'm not saying that I'm learning the entire language just by flashcards, because recently I also have started speaking in the language because I think that's very important too, and I use italki for that. So again, it is an app, it is a program. So I think language learning is made easier in our time because we have more technological resources that can help us. And flashcards isn't the only thing that is going to help you learn a language, but it is a great way of remembering the things that you want to learn and that you already read through. I started using flashcards for every information, for every new word that I am learning right now through textbooks, through my italki conversations, things that I hear on YouTube, things that I encounter on Instagram from Japanese accounts or Twitter, and every word that I don't know, I look up. I try to remember it, or I try to read it a couple of times, and then I put it in my flashcards. And the flashcards app that I use is Anki. I have made several videos on Anki as well, so you can check them out. But you can use any flashcard system, of course. But it is much better to make, of course, your own flashcard in that system. So that's the other thing that I found very interesting in his book. He talks about how people make flashcards, or even how they use pre-made flashcards. and don't really, and still it doesn't really work for them, or it works a little bit. It works better than going only through your notebooks, but it's not enough because you don't have an association with that made flashcard, with that word that you want to remember. The word cat in English, if you're an English native speaker, or the word cat in your own language, it has an association. When you hear cat, you think about your own cats, or the cats that you have seen on the streets, or maybe you had a kitten when you were a child, or you have a kitten right now. So you have certain association. The same thing for the word cake or a car. Everything has a picture in your mind, and most people think in pictures. I know for myself, I have not a photographic memory, but I do have a good memory, and most of the things that I remember in pictures. So I know that not everyone has a photographic memory or a very good memory, but still most people do think in pictures. So when you think about, when someone says computer, mobile, you think about that picture in the mobile in your hand, the computer on your desk, the cat in your house, the car outside. It's just pictures that you see. And when you're learning a foreign language, you don't have that association with the new words that you are learning. So in Japanese, the word for cat is neko, and when you hear neko, you don't have that association with the cat in your house. You don't have the association with the cats outside, because they are called cats and not neko. And I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but the same for the Russian cats or the Russian dogs. He also gives an example. The word dog is entirely different sensation and memory in your head in English or your own native language than the Russian word sabaka. Sabaka is a foreign word that you maybe didn't learn if you're not learning Russian, and it just sounds weird. You don't have an association with dog, and you don't see a picture in your head when you hear this word. So to remember this word better and to make your flashcards more efficient, you have to make a new memory with this word. I think that's like the difficult part for most people. If you don't understand this mechanism in your head, how it works, then you're like, why don't I remember this word? Because I have written down sabaka is dog. But it's just words. It's not a memory, it's not a picture. So when you see the word sabaka, it goes your brain so much more energy to remember that that's a dog. But when you learn that sabaka is a dog in picture, and you really associate yourself, that word, with a Russian dog, I don't know how to explain this, with a picture that you have looked up yourself on the internet, that you have chosen this picture for this dog, for this word, you have an association. You see that picture before you, and now you know that sabaka is a dog. And that works better than just translating the words and making your flashcards only translations. But the key point of this method is the fact that you need to have images and personal connections with the word. So when you're making flashcards for your Go language, and let's say that your Go language is Russian, and you want to make a flashcard for the word book, which is kniga, you don't write down kniga is book. No, you try to find a book on Google Images. He really talks about Google Images a lot, and I think it's the most easy way to find a good picture. You go through all the images and you choose the book that you have an association with, that maybe you know this book, maybe you have read this book, maybe it's the newest Harry Potter book or something else, I don't know, Twilight. You choose that book for your kniga, and then when you go into your flashcards and you see the word kniga and you don't remember it, you try to think about it but you still don't know, and you click on your flashcard to see the back side and you see this book, and then you know it, and the next time it will be a lot easier to recall this word. So that's what I have been doing for Japanese now. I'm making my own flashcards, and I'm going to Google Images to find the right picture for that word that I want to learn. And some words it's just a little bit easier, and some words are a little bit harder. Of course, for almost every object that you want to learn, you can find a picture for. So if you want to learn abstract words, it's a little bit harder. And abstract words are mostly that describe things. So the word beautiful, it's very abstract. You don't have a picture of beautiful because it changes for everyone, and it's a word that describes other things. So beautiful weather, beautiful flower, things like that. So it's a little bit harder to find a good picture for that. But even though if you have a word that you really can't find a picture for, you can make another mnemonic for you to remember that word. And the fact that you were looking for a picture for a couple of minutes and couldn't find it, which makes it a little bit of a harder word to learn, that is a new memory as well. It's a memory of you thinking about this word and looking for a picture and you couldn't find it. So it's a memory on its own, and that makes that word also stand out in your pile of words that you want to learn. It's a great method, and that's one of the biggest things that I have learned from this book, because previously I used to make, even in school, I used to make flashcards and just writing down a lot of information or translations when I was learning French and German in high school. I found it very hard because most of the time in school you learn to literally translate the words to German or to your own language, to French, and then to your own language, and you don't make new memories and new associations with these words. I think that's the reason why I didn't like learning languages in high school and why it was so hard and frustrating to do. And since I have been doing it on my own, I have learned so much more. And also I'm still trying to make my own method which works for me, and this is some information from this book that I really enjoyed and trying to build in my own method. So not all my flashcards have pictures. Some things I didn't find a picture, or didn't give a picture to the flashcards, but I have to say that the words that do have a picture I remembered easier and better than the words without a picture. So even though the words without picture, you will learn them because you still have to go through them a couple of times and then you remember it. And the flashcards, they're a very smart system. When you learn the word good, it goes away for a month or 2 months. I even have words now that will go away in the system for 5 months, and after 5 months I will see it again. And it's better to think about the things that you don't know or can't recall, can't remember, because your brain will think, oh, this is important information and I need to remember it. But when you're just reading through your notes and reading through the book, you're not actively using your brain to remember those things. So you only will remember a couple of things, but not most of it. But when you're making a test, you're really thinking about what you want to learn, and you're really thinking about the things that you didn't learn, and your brain are like in this small panic state. They're like, oh, I don't know this. Why don't I know this? And when you recall the information, or when you just look up the information, your brain will make more effort to learn that word because you didn't know it on the test. So that's another thing that he talks about in this book, about how your brain really remember things. And the great thing about this book as well is the fact that you can use it to make your flashcards better. Of course, he gives a lot of tips. He also has a website which I will link down below, where you can find a lot of information for your specific language as well. So another thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that he makes of course his own flashcards for the languages that he's learning, Gabriel Wyner, but he doesn't use any English. English is, I think, his native language, or the language that he uses to learn other languages, to read about other languages, but he doesn't use any English in his flashcards. So that's something that I didn't achieve yet. It's very hard for me to make flashcards with only pictures, or I don't know, mnemonics for that word. So I do use a lot of English in my flashcards to describe some words or to just give a translation. This is something that Gabriel Wyner says you shouldn't do, or you should try to avoid as much English as you can, because you want to make a new association in that language that you are learning. And I think that's quite hard, because most of the time we do translate words, and it's not always correct, because some words don't have any translation in your native language or in English, and you really have to understand the meaning of that word in context of your go language. And of course, for things like dog, cats, a book, things like that, you don't really have to write the English translation of that word, because the picture can say a lot. But for words that don't have like a specific picture or not very easy to understand from a picture, I like to use translations for that. So it's something that you have to decide for yourself what works better. And another thing that I do use since I have read this book is the 625 words that he describes as the basic foundation almost in every language. And he puts it in categories. You have animals, you have jobs, locations, materials, things like that. So I have been translating these words for myself and trying to find a good image for all of those words. All of those words are very important to know in your new language because most of your daily conversations is focused on basic things. So on your job, on your hobby. So those are the words that you want to know, of course. So I found this 625 words very easy to build my vocabulary in Japanese, but also something that I have been doing for Chinese as well now. So overall, I think this was my first book to read about how we learn languages and about language learning in general from a perspective of a polyglot, and I think it helped me a lot. So I would advise other people to read this book as well. And I think it does, even if you don't like using flashcards, maybe when you read through this book, you will see how flashcards can help you in your language, or maybe you still wouldn't like them and won't use them. But except from flashcards, this book gives a lot of new information, and it is written by someone who learned multiple languages. So he has a general idea of how to learn a language and what works better for him and maybe for other people as well. And you can use it for any language that you are learning right now and just see if some of the methods will work for you. So yeah, I hope you will read it, and I hope you will like it. And if you have read this book, leave down in the comments what you think of it. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like. If you're new to this channel, subscribe for more videos about language learning. And I will see you next time. Bye!